While we rely on GPS to find the nearest coffee shop, Vikings crossed vast unknown oceans using nothing but nature's clues. They could navigate through fog, storms, and featureless seas using techniques so clever that modern scientists are still unlocking their secrets. These weren't just brutal raiders, they were history's greatest pathfinders, and their navigation tricks were far more impressive than their battle axes. Let's be honest, most of us get lost trying to find our car in a parking garage. So how exactly did these seafaring warriors pull off such incredible navigational feats? The answer involves a mix of brilliant observation, clever tools, and techniques so effective that some of them would still work today if your phone battery died in the middle of nowhere. First things first, the sun was basically the Vikings' version of Google Maps. These crafty sailors mastered the art of using the sun's position to determine direction long before compasses became a thing in northern Europe. Archaeological evidence from Viking settlements shows they understood that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. Basic stuff, sure, but they took it to a whole other level. They divided their day into 8 equal parts called eykt, with each eykt representing a different direction. By tracking the sun's movement through these 8 positions, Vikings could maintain a remarkably accurate course. Modern sailors who've tested this method have found it can be accurate to within 5 to 10 degrees. Not bad for a technique developed by people who thought thunder was just Thor having a temper tantrum. But here's where it gets really interesting. What did they do on cloudy days? Because let's face it, if you've ever been to Scandinavia, you know that bright and sunny isn't exactly the daily forecast. This is where one of history's most mysterious navigation tools comes into play, the sunstone. According to Norse sagas, Vikings used something called a solar stain, or sunstone, to locate the sun even when it was hidden behind clouds or just below the horizon. For centuries, historians thought this was just another tall tale, like Viking helmets having horns. They didn't, by the way. That was an opera costume designer's idea from the 1800s. But in 2013, researchers from the University of Rennes in France made a breakthrough discovery. They found that certain crystals found naturally in Scandinavia, specifically Icelandic spar, a form of calcite, have an amazing property. They can reveal the direction of the sun even through heavy cloud cover. When you look through this crystal and rotate it, the light polarizes in a specific pattern that points toward the sun's position. Tests with reconstructed sunstones have shown they can pinpoint the sun's location with an accuracy of about 1 degree. That's better than some budget GPS devices you can buy today. A Viking navigator would hold up this crystal to the cloudy sky, rotate it until a specific pattern appeared, and boom, instant sun location. It's like having a solar compass that works without actually seeing the sun. One medieval text describes a Viking navigator as the man who could find the sun on the grayest of days, which was probably the 10th century equivalent of being called a human GPS. But the Viking navigational toolkit didn't stop there. When night fell, these bearded pathfinders turned their attention to the stars. Archaeological digs at Viking settlements have uncovered wooden discs that historians believe were primitive star charts. These night compasses helped them identify key constellations like Polaris, the North Star. Vikings had special names for navigation stars. They called Polaris Leiterstjarna, literally the guiding star. They also tracked constellation patterns they called Hafvila, which helped them recognize when they were getting off course. One reconstructed Viking chart shows they tracked at least 7 major constellations specifically for navigation purposes. The really clever bit was how they used their thumbs to measure star positions. By holding their arms straight out and measuring the height of key stars with their thumb width, they could determine their approximate latitude. Modern tests have shown this thumb method can be accurate to within about 1 degree of latitude, which is actually impressive considering it's just your thumb we're talking about here. Your thumb, helping you figure out if you're in Iceland or Greenland. Think about that next time you use it just for scrolling through TikTok. When fog rolled in and both the sun and stars were hidden, Vikings had a backup system that would make any modern navigator envious. They used birds as living navigation tools. Historical records describe Vikings bringing cages of ravens on their ships, especially when venturing to new territories, when they thought land might be nearby but couldn't see it through fog, or because it was beyond the horizon. They'd release a raven. Birds have an instinct to fly toward land, so the navigator would carefully watch which direction the raven flew. If it circled and came back to the ship, they knew there was no land nearby. If it flew off confidently in one direction, that's where they'd steer. This technique was so important that one of the most famous Vikings was actually named after it. Floki Vilgerdarson earned the nickname Raven Floki after using this method to discover Iceland. The technique wasn't just clever, it was reliable enough that it became standard practice for Norse exploration. One medieval account describes a Viking captain releasing 3 ravens in sequence, tracking each one's flight path, and triangulating their position based on the results. It was basically nature's version of cell tower triangulation, just with feathers and beaks instead of radio signals. The birds weren't just for finding land. Archaeological evidence from Viking ships has revealed special perches where ravens could rest. Researchers believe Vikings observed which direction the birds naturally oriented themselves when resting, as many birds have an innate sense of direction. Vikings paid close attention to these subtle clues, creating a comprehensive navigation system that utilized every available resource. When it came to coastal navigation, Vikings became masters at reading the landscape in ways that would impress even modern sailors. They created mental maps of coastlines based on distinctive landmarks, memorizing the shapes of mountains, unusual rock formations, and even the colors of different beaches. These weren't written down. They were passed orally from navigator to navigator, creating a kind of shared mental GPS database. Viking sagas describe navigators who could identify their exact location just by noting the shape of waves breaking on a distant shore. Modern oceanographers have confirmed this is actually possible. Each coastline creates distinctive wave patterns that an experienced observer can recognize. These guys were basically human sonar systems. One particularly interesting technique involved listening to the sounds around their ships. On foggy days when visibility was near zero, Viking navigators would fall silent and listen to how the sounds of waves or birds echoed off nearby landmasses. Different types of coastlines created different acoustic patterns. Rocky cliffs produced sharp echoes, while sandy beaches absorbed sound. By interpreting these sonic landscapes, they could hear the coastline even when they couldn't see it. This acoustic navigation wasn't just guesswork. Experiments with reconstructed Viking ships have shown that an experienced navigator can detect land masses up to 3 miles away just by listening to ambient sounds. Next time you can't find your way out of a mall parking lot, try closing your eyes and listening for echoes. Though I can't promise it'll work as well in a Honda Civic as it did on a longship. Even the wildlife in the water served as navigational clues. Vikings learned to recognize which species of fish, seabirds, and marine mammals lived in specific regions. Finding certain types of fish in their nets told them approximately where they were. It was like a medieval version of checking your location tag on Instagram, except instead of downtown coffee shop, it was area with lots of cod. Written accounts describe Viking navigators tasting seawater to determine their position. Different regions had distinctive salinity levels that an experienced sailor could detect. Too salty, you're probably near a warm current. Fresh tasting, you might be near a river outlet or melting ice. Scientific analysis has shown that human taste buds can detect salinity changes as small as 0.3%, enough to distinguish between major ocean regions. The most sophisticated navigation technique in the Viking arsenal had to be their use of sunboards, wooden discs with a center gnomon, the sticky-up part of a sundial, that cast shadows. Archaeological finds at Viking settlements have uncovered these simple but ingenious devices. By marking where shadows fell at different times of day in their home port, Vikings could compare these markings with shadow positions observed during their journey. If the shadow pattern matched what they'd expect at home, they knew they were at the same latitude. It was essentially a portable latitude finder that required nothing more than a piece of wood and a small stick. Modern recreations have shown these sunboards could determine latitude with an accuracy of about half a degree, roughly 35 miles, which is remarkably precise for a handcrafted wooden instrument. But the real secret to Viking navigation success wasn't just their tools. It was how they combined all these methods into a comprehensive system. They didn't rely on any single technique. They cross-referenced multiple approaches to verify their position. Sun position, star alignments, bird behavior, wind patterns, ocean currents, floating vegetation, cloud formations. All these observations were woven together to create a mental map of their position. This redundant navigation system meant that even if clouds blocked the stars or fog hid the coastline, they always had backup methods. It's like having GPS, plus Google Maps, plus a paper map, plus asking for directions, except all of it was stored in their heads and based on careful observation of nature. Their ships themselves were even designed with navigation in mind. The famous Viking longships sat low in the water, giving navigators a perspective similar to what seabirds see when flying close to the waves. This low angle made it easier to spot subtle changes in wave patterns and distant land masses. The ships were also highly maneuverable, allowing them to quickly adjust course based on new navigational information. One of the most fascinating aspects of Viking navigation was their understanding of what modern sailors call sailing the parallel. They knew that by maintaining a constant latitude, keeping the North Star at the same height in the sky, they could reliably sail east or west. This technique allowed them to create latitude highways across the North Atlantic, invisible pathways they could follow between known locations. Archaeological evidence from settlements in Iceland, Greenland, and even Newfoundland shows that Vikings established these settlements along specific latitude lines that were easier to navigate to and from. It wasn't random chance that led them to these locations. It was careful navigational planning. They basically created a highway system across the ocean centuries before anyone thought to put actual highways on land. The proof of their navigational prowess is in their exploration record. Vikings successfully navigated from Scandinavia to England, Ireland, Iceland, Greenland, and even North America, and then made it back home to tell the tale. That last part is crucial because history is full of explorers who found new lands but never made it back. Just ask half the people who tried to find the Northwest Passage. What's most impressive about Viking navigation isn't just that it worked, but that it worked consistently enough to establish regular trade routes across some of the world's most challenging waters. The North Atlantic is notorious for its storms, fog, and rapidly changing conditions. It's basically nature's way of saying, "Turn back now, you fool." Yet historical records show Vikings making seasonal trading voyages along these routes for centuries. Modern navigation experts who've studied these techniques have developed a new respect for Viking methods. Some of their approaches were so effective that elements of them were still being used by traditional sailors in Scandinavia well into the 20th century. When your navigation system has that kind of staying power, you know it's the real deal. These extraordinary navigation methods reveal something profound about Viking culture. Their success wasn't just about raids and conquests. It was built on generations of careful observation, knowledge sharing, and a deep understanding of the natural world. While we marvel at modern technology, Viking navigators remind us that human ingenuity has always found ways to solve seemingly impossible challenges. Drop a comment below about what aspect of Viking life you'd like to explore next. Were they really the fearsome warriors we imagine? What was daily life like in a Viking village? Or maybe you're curious about their shipbuilding techniques? Let us know and we might just set sail on that topic in our next video.